Hello, and thank you for coming to our Pacifictech's purchasing workflow with PWWeb and PTGo mobile app and DPS. My name's Bill Fligg, and I'm here with you today to show you how our connected services work with our modules in Sage 300. A little bit about Pacifictech. We've been in the Sage 300 space for over 25 years, providing what is known as Tier 1 capability and enhanced functionality to over 3,000 Sage customers around the globe. Our focus is comprehensive workflows with a full procure-to-pay suite, including AP automation. We are a Sage Select Tech partner, and we develop products that only integrate into Sage solutions. Our data centers are in Australia, Canada, South Africa, and New Zealand. We truly are a global ISV, most recently winning Sage Tech Partner of the Year for Sage Australia. A little overview on our solutions. If you were to put them into four compartments, you could say we have Automation Suite, which is the automated vendor invoice data extraction, and we have Mobility Suite, which is the ability to communicate with Sage 300 through web browser and mobile app. We have Control Suite, which is where you have the ability to use a product called Audit Logger to audit user activity, or you can use our workflow notifications to put workflows to control various user activities in Sage 300 so that if something is done that you would like to review before it goes live, you can put a workflow on that, such as changing vendor bank accounts, creating new vendors, creating new customers, customer credit limits. And also there's our workflow suites, our purchasing workflow, controlling the creation and approval of POs in Sage 300, our payables workflow with the approvals of AP and PO invoices, and workflow documents, which allows you to go paperless inside of Sage 300, attaching documents to the posted transactions. Also, workflow notifications, which is part of our control suite, gives you the ability to approve vendor payments. We don't handle the actual payment, but we audit the approval of the payment. A quick overview, when you're looking at our PW Web, which is our web connector to Sage 300, it communicates to all of our workflows in Sage 300 from procurement, purchasing workflow, with our funds availability that gives you cost center controls using GL budgets, supplier invoice workflow, which is our payables workflow, both of those working with our workflow documents, which allows you to go paperless and the documents can be attached to the posted transactions, and our workflow notifications, which allows you to have workflow controls through various areas of Sage 300, as well as the ability to approve vendor payments. All of this is accessible through our browser connector called PWWeb. This schematic overview is very important. The hexagon in the middle and the one on the right with the green perimeter represents your Sage 300 environment. On the right, with your ability to create AP invoices, POs, and so on. In the middle, this represents our workflows, where we get in between the creation and the final posting of these transactions, both in procurement, creating POs, and in vendor invoice posting. We don't change anything to do with your Sage 300 end result. We only get in the middle to create approval workflows that are fully audited inside Sage 300. We add an events tab so that you can see the life cycle of the posted transaction, whether it was the request to create a PO or whether it was a vendor invoice being approved. On the left-hand side is our connected services, showing the ability to use a browser and our mobile phone app, the browser being PWWeb, mobile phone app being our PTGo app. The difference is if you have somebody in AP submitting an invoice for review, instead of having your managers log in directly through Sage 300, tying up Sage land packs, and it may not be appropriate to have them in your ERP. They can log in through PWWeb or the PTGo app and review and approve the transactions that require their attention. Through this connected service, you can have up to 50 users on one Sage land pack versus having them tie one to one if they're directly inside of Sage 300. In addition, for procurement, your requesters can use PWWeb to do web requisitions to request purchases that ultimately create POs. When they do this, your approvers can also review and approve using PW Web and the PTGo mobile app. When you look at creation of AP and PO invoices in Sage 300, as a major time saver, we provide what we call our DPS, which is our document processing service, third generation OCR with AI and machine learning. We provide a unique email address for each one of your companies or entities inside your Sage 300 instance. You would forward the vendor invoice by email to that email address, and it would go directly through our scanning service in real time and end up inside your Sage 300 in the DPS console for your AP person to review and submit with the data from the vendor invoice already extracted and the document already attached. This is a very large time saver when you look at how many invoices process in a month. This person can now be more functional in a more meaningful way than simply data entry. Let's take a look at how the relationship works between the web user and the mobile app user and your Sage 300 server. So on the right, we have in green your Sage 300 server. In the center, we have our server. And on the left, we have the PW Web and PTGo mobile app users. We provide 3 dedicated IP addresses to your IT department so that they can allow them through the port of their choice. They would let us know what port to use for this access. We do not store any of your company data in our server. We strictly act as a conduit to allow the users to log into your server through our server, so that the relationship outside of your server environment is strictly with our server, and we deal with the public traffic in a very secure fashion. Let's take a look at the product live. So here we have our PW Web. Relogo and colorize this according to your corporate brand. Your users would simply put their username and their password and the company that they're looking for. Now it's reaching through our server to your server, requesting details about this person to see what they can view and what they're allowed to do. And here it is. You can see there's a number of menu options across the top for this person, and these can be controlled based on their functionality in the organization. In this case, currently, I'm going to do a new requisition for a purchase order. So I would select New Requisition. From there, I would select the workflow, the department. You can use templates to speed things up for purchases you do on a regular basis. So in this case, I can select this template for conference, and it populated 3 line items automatically. You do not have to use these. This is a standard feature inside of Sage 300, and you can simply delete the line items that you do not wish to have. From there, select Edit, the quantity of this item, and the cost of the item. Any notes, and update. You have now added a line item. If you wish to add a supporting document and you have our workflow documents, select the attach your quote, and it has become part of this purchase requisition, and you can see it right here. If you like, you can have a requested date. If you use PJC, you can select job related and all the other aspects of a purchase requisition relating to ship to and bill to. From there, you can either save or submit. So I'm going to submit, and this is reaching back to the server, and it's going to create a purchase requisition and provide the requisition number. This is working live inside of your Sage 300. It's just created requisition number 35. If I was interested in inquiring of the status of this requisition, I could go to Inquiries. I could say My Requisitions. From there, I could select 35, and I could see details associated to this, but more particularly the events as to who's the next actioner. At this point, it's gone to the division manager for review. This person would have received an email notifying them that they have a purchase requisition that requires their attention. in that email, you can have a quick link to PWWeb so they can quickly click the URL, get to PWWeb, log in and review. I can also look at funds availability from here, which is another connection that we have in PWWeb to review budget. I can see the document that's attached, optional fields if there are any. So let's pretend we're the manager who now received an email and has to look at this. I will log in as the division manager. Now the division manager also approves payables, invoices, as well as purchase requisitions. So in the approval console, I have choices. I can review purchasing workflow, payables workflow, and workflow notifications. I can set my default in my profile settings as to what screen that I would like to land on and other preferences. Let's take a look at the purchase requisition that was just submitted. So here we are, number 35. There's a few options at this point. I can click the purchase requisition and review it from here and see the details. I can see the document that's been attached. I can see in the Events tab who submitted this, who's asking to do this purchase. I can see funds availability for budgeting. If I would like to view the funds availability in another way, I can click the dollar sign on the right. If I would like to know more about my cost center budgets and funds availability, I can select funds availability cost center inquiry here, where I can select my cost center, refresh. I can see the GL codes that are here and the areas of my budget that are affected to date or by any specific date. Let's go back to the approval console. If I'm satisfied with this purchase requisition, I could select approve and say something in this comment line up to 60 characters, which is the same number of characters that you can use inside of Sage 300. I would then select postmark documents and it would go back to the server and create the transaction. Let's pretend that I'm using our PT Go app. And here we have a browser simulator of the PT Go app. I would type in my username, my password, and the company that I'm logging into. It would be reaching back now to the server to see who I am and what I'm allowed to see and do. It's asking me if I would like this to be my default company, and I say yes, if that's what I like. I can see I have one requisition that requires my attention. I can see that it's requisition number 35, the same as this number over here that we can see in PWWeb. From the mobile app, I can see the details. I can see the events that took place, who submitted it to me. I can see the attached document, and I could, if I want, approve it from here. Again, up to 60 character comments. Let's take a look how this is in Sage 300, the exact same transaction. I'm going to log in as the division manager, and I'm going to go to purchasing workflow, going to go to PW transactions approval console. And here's our requisition number 35. So you can see this is very consistent between Sage 300, PWWeb, and our PT Go app. You can see, as you would expect, the events here, the attached document, and so on. In Sage 300, you would be able to select yes and up to 60 characters if you were approving it from here. But I would like to show you that if I approve this using the mobile phone app, that it will remove it immediately from PWWeb and you will see it no longer available in this screen. So here we are back in the mobile phone app. I'm going to say this is okay with me. I'm going to submit it. It's turned green. It's reaching back to the server, affecting change in Sage 300. Now you can see that the transaction is gone. Let's refresh our screen in PWWeb. As you can see, it is no longer in PWWeb. Now let's take a look inside Sage 300. I will select refresh and you should see this transaction go away. And there it is, it's gone. So that demonstrates that our connected service using the PTGo app was real time, affecting change inside of Sage 300. Now, let's take a look at Payables workflow and how that works with PWWeb, PTGo app, and our document processing service. For our document processing service, we would give you this dedicated email address that would go through our scanning service and arrive inside your company in Sage 300, usually within approximately 5 minutes. You would forward the attached vendor invoice if it came to you by email. If it came by mail, you would put it on your scanner and have the address set in your scanner to scan to this email address, and it would come through to Sage 300. So I'm going to select send. Let's go back to Sage 300 and I'll log back in as the AP person. You can see our payables workflow module. You would select the PA document processing service and you would see the console, PA DPS console. And here you would see your in tray, much like the in tray on your desk where people would be putting invoices that need processing. Instead of seeing those pieces of paper on your desk piling up on an in tray, they arrive here. You would select the invoice that you would like to review and process. You can see that it's been already attached and you can have a quick review. It already knows who the vendor is based on settings inside the Payables workflow setup over in vendor settings. You select your vendor and the identifier can be a number of things, including tax registration numbers in the vendor master file. In this scenario, we've used the tax registration number 1. Let's take a look at a couple other things. You can have this consolidating line items or not, depending on how you want that to work. There is a document training setting where you would select indexing when you're setting up a new vendor, and you would send 5 vendor invoices through to the scanning service where you would log in to our training center, review the document, make sure that it captured the correct data in the correct fields, and correct anything that's not right. And it will learn the correct process after processing 5 invoices and usually within about 5 hours. When that's complete, you can select output, save, and it will never go back to the training center again, and it will come straight through here. You can also set default cost centers and workflows for your PO invoices and your AP invoices if it's easier for you to have them going by default. Let's take a look now at the vendor master file to see where the identifier was set on this vendor. Go into the invoicing tab. In this case, we've got tax registration class 1, and we're using their tax number, which is on their invoices. You could put a phone number, other unique data that only is on that vendor invoice here for the DPS service to recognize and identify that vendor. So now that we know how that works, let's go back to the DPS console and it makes more sense. Why, when we sent this through, that it understands that it belonged to this vendor and that we had a default workflow and a cost center. It also knew to classify it as an AP invoice and not a PO invoice because it does not have a PO on it. And during training, it learned that this particular vendor is an AP invoice. You can, however, change this if it does not get it correctly or you need to associate an invoice to a PO. And you can put your customer reference number here if you have one and a PO number there. So let's put this back to AP invoice, and you can see that it's extracted the line items off of this invoice correctly. If there was an issue, you could simply click and edit anything that didn't look right. At this point, if we're satisfied, we simply select Process. And this is going to create an AP invoice without the time that you would normally spend entering all this data. Everything's here, the invoice number, the vendor, the workflow, the cost center, document total, the line items. This is complete. You did not have to enter any of this manually. However, if you need to edit any of it, such as GL code, and we do respect default vendor settings, and in the vendor master file, you can have a default GL code, but it can always be edited. Everything here can be edited. You'll see that in the Workflow Documents tab, the attachment is already there and you did not have to do attach. However, you can attach more if you like. So here we go. We'll select submit, and this is now off for approval. At this point, the managers received an email saying that they have an invoice that requires their attention. This is an example of the email that the manager would have received with the invoice attached, invoice details, and a quick link to PWWeb. Now the manager can go back to PWWeb, log back in, go to the approval console, go to Payables Workflow Approvals. You can see the invoice here. There are several ways to review this invoice. You can go to the quick view icon, select, and it will load a view that shows the document on the right-hand side and the details on the left-hand side. At this time, if you have edit option, you can edit details related to the line items, including GL code. The other way to view this invoice is to simply select the invoice number, and you can view the line item details, the tabs, the events tab, so you can see who submitted this and where it's at in the approval process, and the attached document. Another way that you can work with this is if you're allowed to edit, you can select the edit icon on the far right, and it will give you a full view of all the invoice details and line items, where you can, if required, edit any of the details. Another way that we can view the vendor invoice requiring approval is by using the PT Go mobile app, which is available for iPhones and Android. The user simply puts in their username, password, and selects the business that they would like to log into. Once they've logged in, they can see invoices and actual purchase requests that require their attention and approval. In this scenario, we see that there is one AP invoice outstanding, which is exactly the same as what we see in PWWeb over here to the left. So we'll select AP invoices. We can see this invoice listed here. Just select the invoice number. And from there, you can see the invoice detail, the vendor information, the total amount. You can select transaction detail to see the line items. You can select workflow events to see how this invoice came to you and who submitted it. And you can select workflow documents to see the attached documents. From there, you can select approve or decline. At this time, you can enter comments up to 60 characters long, the same as you can do directly inside of Sage 300 or using PWWeb. In this scenario, I am logged into Sage 300 as the same user, and I am inside the approval console. I can see our invoice here, and I can select it and review the details in Sage 300. If I were to approve it here, I would select approve, yes or no, and I could type up to 60 characters. Now at this time, I'm going to go back and I'm going to approve it from the PT Go app, and then you're going to see it disappear from PW Web, and I'm going to come back here and you're going to see that it's no longer here. So here we are back in the PT Go app. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to approve this, and I'll say OK with me and submit. And you can see it's turned green while it's communicating with the server, making this transaction take place. Now, if I go back over to PW Web and I refresh the screen, we'll see this invoice disappear. Now I'm back inside of Sage 300 and we'll select refresh, and that invoice is no longer looking for approval. This is really just to help you understand that using PW Web and our PT Go app, the transactions and the activity is happening live in Sage 300 and nothing is really happening in either one of those tools. And they are really just views of Sage 300 so that users can work outside of Sage 300 from browsers and mobile phones. So that concludes our Pacifictech Connected Services overview and demonstration of how our PW Web, PT Go app, and DPS document processing service can extend and improve the functionality for your Sage 300. Let's take a look at some differentiators, features, benefits, and testimonials. Pacifictech differentiators. The data is all inside of Sage 300, so there's no issues with syncing of data between two separate systems, unlike many other third-party products that have other databases and you're using other software products trying to sync back and forth. The configuration is all inside of Sage 300, so it's easy for our business partners to learn and work with. It's basically plug and play. It uses AP vendor or app vend settings. So, for example, you can use default GL codes when you're bringing in AP automation transactions. It looks at the vendor default settings, and if you have default GL codes set up, it brings those forward. The data extraction is third generation technology, lower cost, an end-to-end procure-to-pay process. Pacifictech PT Go app benefits. As a testimonial, this company felt that it was an easy and intuitive mobile app. Quick approval processing, you could view attachments, and ability to add notes. The app has been positively received by everyone that uses it. To say the least, they were quite happy with their Pacifictech solution. Let's take a look at some of our modules. In this recording, we did see our payables workflow as part of the AP automation and our DPS OCR scanning service with vendor invoice approvals. Our purchasing workflow was also briefly demonstrated here, where you have the ability to do purchase requisitions and have POs created through an approval process. PW Web, as we saw here, remote access to Sage 300 for purchase requisitions and approvals. Vendor catalogs, where you can control vendor supply agreements, pricing, dates, and so on. Workflow documents is where you go paperless and can attach supporting documentation to your purchase requisitions and your vendor invoice approvals. Commitment accounting provides advanced fiscal management reporting of your budgetary position and your commitments. Funds availability is a great add-on for purchasing workflow, in particular, where you can see your cost center budgets that are directly tied into your GL budgets. And when somebody's doing a request to spend money, they can see if they have room left in their budget or not. The workflow can also control whether or not this can be approved and if somebody else needs to have a second look based on budget. Workflow notifications, where you have controls around various areas of Sage 300 that you can put a workflow on to prevent certain activity in your accounting system without you having the ability to have a second look to make sure you're satisfied with what's being done. Advanced stock take, module that extends the month-end, year-end functionality in inventory with Sage 300, where you can have multiple worksheets to add your inventory by classification. You can have a retroactive month end or retroactive year end. These two features alone are what most organizations dealing with the struggles of IC inventory make it worth getting this module. Audit Logger, auditing user activity throughout Sage 300 so you can audit various areas to see who has affected change. Internal issues is used during the procurement process where you can assign product to various areas of your organization for expensing when it's being taken from inventory and through the approval process. Key communications, advanced communications through the documents being sent from Sage 300 in regards to invoices, statements, and so on. It gives you a document repository that you can see the history of everything that's been sent, and you can quickly, easily resend. That concludes our overview of Pacifictech Connected Services. Thank you for watching. For more details, go to our website at pacifictechsol.com where you can learn more.